Have you ever looked your own blood in the eyes and realized they are the most dangerous strangers you will ever meet? I used to think family meant safety. Then, one misplaced phone exposed a ruthless, multi-million-dollar conspiracy orchestrated in the dark for over 10 years. If you are hearing this, hold your phone tight. Sometimes, answering a call meant for someone else does not just reveal a secret, it burns down your entire bloodline. Hello to the wonderful audience of Maya Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with no budget to keep operating. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to cover their living expenses and continue bringing you these gripping tales. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or pinned comment below. My name is Ashley Contreras. I am 32 years old, and my life is built on precision. As a structural engineer for Stratatech Engineering in Chicago, my entire career revolves around finding the exact point where a foundation might crack. But I never thought to inspect the foundation of my own family. I was rushing out of my father Marcus's sprawling mansion in Seattle. The dinner had been suffocating, filled with the usual passive-aggressive remarks and clinking wine glasses that sounded more like warning bells. I was desperate to catch my red-eye flight back to Illinois. In the dim light of the grand foyer, I grabbed my black wool coat and snatched my phone off the marble console table. It was encased in a matte black rubber shell. Standard, unremarkable. I threw it into my leather tote bag and practically ran to the waiting cab. By the time I collapsed into seat 12B, the cabin doors were closing. The recycled air smelled of stale coffee and jet fuel. The cabin lights dimmed to a harsh, synthetic blue. Outside the scratched acrylic window, the Seattle rain pelted the tarmac. The engines whined, vibrating through the thin floorboards as the plane began to taxi toward the runway. I reached into my bag to switch my device to airplane mode. My fingers brushed the cold rubber case. Just as I pulled it out, the screen lit up, illuminating my face in the dark cabin. The phone vibrated violently in my palm. I stared at the screen. It was not my lock screen wallpaper, and the incoming call display showed a name that made my stomach tighten. Chloe. Chloe was my impulsive, reckless younger sister, my father's golden child, the one who could do no wrong, no matter how many millions she burned through. Confusion washed over me. Why was Chloe calling me right now? And why did the phone look so strange? Then it hit me. Two identical black phone cases on the marble console table. I had grabbed my father's phone. I pressed the green answer button. I brought the speaker to my ear, opening my mouth to tell her she had reached the wrong person. Before a single syllable could leave my throat, Chloe's voice sliced through the receiver. It was not her usual whiny, demanding tone. It was frantic, cold, razor sharp. Move the money before she finds out. The words hung in the air, heavier than the cabin pressure building around me. I froze. My breath hitched in my chest. The roaring of the jet engines faded into a distant hum. "Dad, are you listening to me?" Chloe hissed, her voice vibrating against my eardrum. "The buyer is getting anxious. We have to liquidate the commercial block right now. You need to finalize the transfer before her 33rd birthday next month. Once she gets legal control of the trust, we are completely screwed. Do it tonight." Click. The line went dead. She hung up before I could even process the magnitude of what she had just said. The screen went black, reflecting my wide, terrified eyes. My 33rd birthday. The exact day I was legally entitled to take over the massive commercial real estate portfolio my late mother had left behind. My hands began to shake. The plane banked sharply, the wheels lifting off the wet runway, pressing me deep into my seat. The seatbelt dug into my hips, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the sudden, agonizing knot twisting in my gut. I stared at the black rectangle in my lap. It felt like a live grenade. My thumb hovered over the home button. Marcus never updated his security protocols. He used the same 4-digit passcode for everything since I was a teenager. The year my mother started her first company, 1998. The screen unlocked instantly. The cabin around me disappeared. I stopped being a daughter. I became an engineer inspecting a collapsed building. I dug through the wreckage. I opened his email app. I opened his messages. I opened the encrypted folders he thought he had hidden well enough. What I found made the blood drain from my face. There were dozens of wire transfer receipts funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars into offshore shell companies. There were long, confusing threads detailing massive cryptocurrency conversions, effectively scrubbing the money clean and untraceable. And then, I found the legal documents, sales agreements for the crown jewel of my mother's real estate empire. At the bottom of the last page, glowing brightly against the harsh white screen, was my signature. It was a perfect forgery. The flight attendants began moving down the narrow aisle, the metal beverage cart rattling against the seats. The normal world was continuing right beside me, completely oblivious to the fact that my entire reality had just been shattered. They were stealing everything. My father and my sister were stripping my mother's legacy to the bone, smiling at me over roasted lamb and red wine just 2 hours ago. A sudden, sharp chime broke my concentration. A text message popped down from the top of the screen. It was from my own phone number. "Ashley, honey, I think you accidentally took my phone. Call me as soon as you land." I stared at the words. The fake warmth made me nauseous. Panic is a useless emotion. In structural engineering, when a support beam fails, you do not panic. You assess the damage, you calculate the load, and you build a reinforcement plan. My panicked tears dried up, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I locked the phone and slipped it into the inner zippered pocket of my bag. I leaned my head against the cold plastic wall of the cabin and stared out into the pitch-black night sky. I was not going to return this phone. Not yet. The game had just changed, and for the first time in my life, I held the winning hand. The flight landed in Illinois just before sunrise. I did not go to sleep. Walking into my downtown Chicago apartment, the silence felt different. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a war room. By 8 o'clock in the morning, I had emailed my department head at Stratatech Engineering. I requested an indefinite personal leave of absence. There were no questions asked. I had not taken a single sick day in 4 years. I brewed a pot of black coffee, cleared my drafting table of architectural blueprints, and placed Marcus's device in the dead center. I connected it to my dual monitor setup, mirroring the screen so I could map out the data like I would a stress test on a load-bearing wall. Every text, every email, every hidden file was a crack in the concrete. As the data transferred, my mind drifted to my mother. Elena was a force of nature. She was a self-made real estate developer who built an empire out of nothing but sheer will and a ruthless eye for undervalued properties. She died when I was in college, leaving behind a vacuum that Marcus immediately filled. The terms of her will were supposed to be ironclad. The estate was to be divided equally between Chloe and me. However, my mother had instituted a safeguard. Knowing we were young, she gave Marcus temporary administrative control over the trust until I reached the age of 33. She thought she was protecting us. She thought the man she married would act as an honorable guardian. Instead, she handed him the keys to the vault. Staring at the bank statements illuminating my monitors, the illusion of my family dissolved completely. The toxic favoritism I had felt my entire life was no longer just a bitter suspicion. It was quantified in black and white. There were ledger entries showing millions of dollars bleeding out of the primary accounts. Chloe had been handed capital for a designer clothing line that never launched, a boutique fitness studio that went bankrupt in 6 months, and a pseudo-wellness brand that was essentially a scam, millions, handed over with a loving smile. Meanwhile, I had spent my 20s suffocating under 6-figure student loans. I paid for my own engineering degree. I lived on instant noodles and worked graveyard shifts while my sister posted vacation photos from luxury yachts in the Mediterranean. Marcus always told me he wanted me to build character. He said he was teaching me the value of hard work. The truth was, he was just saving the capital for his favorite child. The deeper I dug into the encrypted folders, the worse the structural damage became. The most devastating blow came when I found the loan agreements from a private equity firm known for predatory lending. Marcus had not just given Chloe cash. When the liquid assets ran dry, he took out massive, high-interest loans to cover the catastrophic debts of Chloe's latest venture, a disastrous tech startup that collapsed before it even secured a patent. And the collateral he used to secure those loans? It was not his own property. It was my half of the commercial real estate portfolio. He had legally mortgaged my future to pay for my sister's failures. Right then. My personal phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I walked over and picked it up. A new message from Marcus. "Morning, sweetie. Did you happen to see my phone when you left last night? I cannot find it anywhere." I stared at the screen. A cold, mechanical calm washed over me. I typed my response with steady fingers. "Hi, Dad. No, I did not see it. I rushed out pretty fast. You should probably contact the carrier and report it lost so they can lock it down." His reply came a minute later. "Good idea. Love you. Safe travels." "Love you too," I typed back. I tossed my phone aside. I had just bought myself a window of time, but I knew he would eventually realize a simple lost phone report would not wipe the local hard drive I was currently backing up to my secure cloud server. The timeline was horrifyingly tight. I pulled up the calendar. I had exactly 3 weeks until my 33rd birthday. 3 weeks until the legal barrier dissolved and I could audit the trust myself. That was why Chloe was so frantic on the plane. They were out of time. The documents I uncovered showed they were in the final stages of liquidating the crown jewel of my mother's portfolio, a massive, historically protected commercial building in the heart of the business district. It was the most valuable asset in the entire trust. The paperwork indicated a rushed sale to a foreign conglomerate at 30% below market value. The money was scheduled to be routed through 3 different offshore accounts, effectively disappearing the assets across international borders before I could ever claim them. They were going to leave me with the debt, take the cash, and vanish. The demolition was scheduled, but they did not realize the engineer was already on site. 72 hours later, I was back on the West Coast. I did not fly into Seattle. The risk of running into anyone associated with my father was too high. Instead, I landed 300 miles south in Portland, Oregon. I rented a sterile, anonymous room at a cheap motel near the highway and immediately went to work. My first stop was the Multnomah County Land Registry office. If Marcus was moving assets across state lines to obscure the paper trail, public property records were the thread I needed to pull. I spent 8 hours buried in municipal archives, tracing shell companies registered under absurd, generic names. Returning to the motel that evening, the neon sign blinking outside my window, I dove back into the mirrored data from my father's phone. I was cross-referencing the property deeds when I noticed an anomaly in his mail application. Hidden deep within his archived folders was an email address that made my heart skip a beat. It was my mother's primary business account, the one that was supposed to have been deactivated 10 years ago. Marcus had quietly restored it. It took me 2 hours of running brute force decryption scripts to bypass the secondary authentication he had layered over it. When the inbox finally loaded, the screen populated with thousands of old correspondences, but I was not interested in the daily operations of her past business. I filtered the search by the last 6 months of her life. A specific, encrypted chain of messages surfaced. They were labeled highly confidential and sent to an external, private server. Just as I clicked the first message, my laptop screen was hijacked by an incoming video call. The customized ringtone echoed off the cheap motel walls. It was Chloe. My blood ran cold. If she saw the drab, floral wallpaper of this Oregon motel room instead of my sleek Chicago apartment, the entire operation would blow up in my face. The phone rang a second time, a third. I had about 10 seconds before she hung up and grew suspicious. I scrambled off the bed. I grabbed my laptop, dragging the charging cord across the stained carpet, and backed myself into the tiny bathroom. The walls were a generic, flat white, similar enough to the paint in my Chicago kitchen. I shut the door, flipped on the harsh overhead light, and quickly grabbed a ceramic coffee mug to complete the illusion of a casual morning at home. I took a deep breath. smoothing my expression into a mask of mild annoyance, and hit the green accept button. "Hey," Chloe chirped. Her face filled the screen, perfectly contoured, sitting in the back of a luxury town car. "You look terrible. Did I wake you?" "I am working from home today," I lied smoothly, bringing the mug to my lips. "I was up late running structural diagnostics. What do you need?" "Chloe." "Nothing," she said, her eyes darting slightly. "Just checking in. Dad mentioned you rushed out the other night. You seemed stressed. Are you sure you are doing okay?" It was a fishing expedition. She wanted to know if I suspected anything. She wanted to see if the ticking clock of my 33rd birthday was on my radar. "I am fine," I replied, keeping my voice utterly flat. "Just a massive deadline for the firm. I will probably be completely off the grid for the next 2 weeks to finish this project. Tell Dad I said hello." "Oh, sure. Do not work too hard." "Ash," she purred, the fake sympathy dripping from her words. "Bye." The screen went dark. My hands were shaking so violently I had to set the laptop down on the closed toilet seat. I waited 2 full minutes, listening to the hum of the bathroom exhaust fan, before I finally let out the breath I was holding. That was entirely too close. I carried the computer back to the bed and opened my mother's encrypted emails. What I read over the next 3 hours shattered any lingering, naive hope I had that my father was simply a greedy man trying to protect his favorite child. It was much darker than that. The emails were a digital diary of a marriage falling apart behind closed doors. My mother knew Marcus was siphoning funds, but more disturbingly, she documented his deep, seething resentment toward me. In a message dated just 2 months before her passing, she wrote, "Marcus cannot stand that Ashley does not need him. He views her independence as a threat to his authority. He actively wants her to fail so she will be forced to rely on him, just like Chloe does. He feeds on Chloe's dependence, but Ashley's success makes him feel small. If I die, he will not just steal from Ashley. He will try to destroy her to prove a point. He did not just want the money. He wanted to punish me for surviving without him. He wanted to break the foundation I had built for myself." I wiped a single angry tear from my cheek and kept reading. The recipient of these emails was not a lawyer or a therapist. It was a man named Elias Thorne. Elias was my mother's original business partner. He was a brilliant, ruthless negotiator who helped her build the empire from the ground up. I remembered him vaguely from my childhood, a towering figure with a sharp gaze. But right after my mother's funeral, Marcus had aggressively forced Elias out of the company, citing a sudden difference in corporate vision. The industry rumors claimed Elias took a massive buyout and retired in disgrace. But the final email in the chain, sent just 48 hours before my mother's fatal heart attack, proved the rumors were fabricated. She had attached a massive encrypted file, writing one last directive to Elias. "Keep this safe. If Marcus ever tries to dismantle what I built for my girls, use this to burn him to the ground." I sat back against the headboard, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark room. Marcus thought he had buried all his enemies. He forgot that a good engineer always checks the blueprints for hidden structural supports. I closed my laptop, grabbed my coat, and prepared to track down a ghost. Tracking down Elias Thorne led me to a dilapidated coastal diner perched on the rocky edge of Cannon Beach, about 80 miles northwest of Portland. The wind howled against the salt-stained windows, rattling the cheap aluminum frames and threatening to shatter the glass. The weather perfectly matched the storm brewing inside my chest. Elias was sitting alone in a dimly lit corner booth. He did not look like the defeated, disgraced exile Marcus had painted him to be. He was a man carved from driftwood, all sharp angles, hardened lines, and quiet danger. His eyes, a piercing slate gray, locked onto me the moment I walked through the door. There was no grandfatherly warmth in his gaze, no soft nostalgia. He looked like a veteran predator who had just been handed a loaded weapon. I walked over and slid into the vinyl booth opposite him. "You have her eyes," Elias stated, sliding a heavy ceramic mug of black coffee across the chipped formica table. "But you have her posture, Elena never slouched when she was preparing for war. I wrapped my cold hands around the mug. You knew I would come. I knew Marcus would eventually get greedy enough to set off the alarms, Elias replied, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that barely carried over the sound of the crashing waves outside. Your father is an arrogant man. Arrogance makes people sloppy. He spent 10 years believing he was the smartest person in the room. Elias reached down into his weathered leather briefcase and pulled out a remarkably thick, sealed manila envelope. He dropped it onto the table with a heavy thud. Your mother was a visionary. Ashley, he said softly, leaning forward. She knew exactly who she married. She stayed with him because she wanted a stable, unbroken facade for you and Chloe while she built the empire, but she never trusted him with the foundation. She knew he resented your independence. She knew he worshipped Chloe's reliance on him. I stared at the thick envelope, my heart hammering against my ribs. He has legal control of the trust until I turn 33. I saw the documents on his phone. He used my half of the commercial portfolio as collateral for high-interest loans to bail out Chloe. He is selling the main commercial building next week. Elias let out a harsh, barking laugh that held absolutely zero amusement. He thinks he used it as collateral. He thinks the amended trust he filed with the state gave him absolute, unilateral authority. What Marcus does not know is that Elena baked a fatal poison pill into the original corporate charter. Elias broke the seal on the envelope and slid a stack of yellowing, heavily notarized pages toward me. This is the true, unalterable master trust document. Elena established it as an irrevocable generation-skipping trust, heavily shielded by a dual consent clause. It requires my signature, as the independent executor, for any liquidation or leveraging of primary assets exceeding $500,000. Marcus forged her signature on a secondary, revocable amendment days after she died. He bribed a desperate notary to backdate it, but this document, Elias tapped the heavy, textured paper with a thick finger, was filed under a completely different holding company name in Delaware, a ghost entity Marcus never knew existed. I scanned the dense legal jargon, my engineering mind rapidly assembling the disparate pieces into a terrifyingly clear blueprint. So the loans he took out, the mortgages he placed on the commercial buildings to fund Chloe's startups, they are completely fraudulent, Elias finished, his eyes gleaming with a cold, vindictive fire. He pledged assets he never legally possessed, that is bank fraud, and the money he has been funneling offshore to hide it from you. I have spent the last decade quietly auditing his phantom transactions. I have IP addresses, routing numbers, and offshore corporate registrations. He crossed state lines and international borders. He committed federal wire fraud on a massive scale. The penalty for that is up to 20 years in federal prison per count. A heavy silence settled over our table, broken only by the clattering of dishes from the kitchen and the relentless rain outside. I looked down at the documents. The evidence was irrefutable, meticulously catalogued, and devastating. It was a perfectly constructed snare, waiting for a trigger. My mother had not just left me an inheritance, she had left me a loaded gun to defend it. We could take this to the authorities right now, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We could freeze his accounts today. We could, Elias agreed, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. But if we strike now, he will drag it out in civil court for a decade. He will claim ignorance. He will hire expensive lawyers to create reasonable doubt and drain the accounts to pay his legal fees. If you want to stop a parasite, you do not just cut it off. You let it gorge itself until it bursts. Elias laid out the strategy. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. We were not going to stop the pending sale of the Crown Jewel commercial building. We were going to let Marcus and Chloe bring the foreign buyers to the table. We were going to let them sign the final, fraudulent transfer deeds. We were going to let them commit the ultimate, undeniable felony in a room full of powerful witnesses. He wants to execute the sale before your 33rd birthday, Elias explained, sipping his cold coffee. He needs your signature to waive any future claims of contestation, just to satisfy the paranoid foreign buyers. He will try to corner you. He will try to force you to sign under pressure. He relies on the illusion of family, I murmured, the pieces clicking together flawlessly in my mind. He thinks I am too well behaved to cause a scene in public. He thinks I am still the quiet girl who just wants her father's approval. Are you? Elias asked softly, challenging me. I am an engineer, I replied, meeting his hard gaze without blinking. I know exactly how to trigger a controlled demolition, as if the universe was listening. The burner phone in my pocket vibrated. I had forwarded all notifications from my real device to this secure line. I pulled it out. A new text message illuminated the screen. It was from Marcus. The tone was sickeningly sweet, dripping with the fake paternal affection he always weaponized when he needed something. Hi, sweetheart. We miss you. Chloe and I are hoping you can fly home this weekend. We want to host a little early birthday dinner for you at the club. Also, there are just a few boring inheritance paperwork formalities I need you to sign to wrap things up before your big day. Let me know what time your flight lands. Love you. I stared at the glowing words. 10 years of manipulation, a lifetime of being sidelined, used and resented, all wrapped up in a polite invitation to my own financial execution. They thought I was walking into a slaughterhouse. They did not realize I was bringing the butcher. I looked up at Elias. He was watching me intently, waiting to see what I would do. I unlocked the screen. I did not hesitate. My fingers flew across the digital keyboard, typing out my response with icy precision. That sounds great. Dad, I will be there. The heavy mahogany doors of the private dining room swung open, and I stepped into a meticulously crafted illusion. The restaurant was arguably the most exclusive Michelin-starred establishment in downtown Seattle, a place where fortunes were traded over plates of white truffle and vintage wine. The air inside the VIP suite was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and roasted Wagyu beef, but to me, it felt entirely devoid of oxygen. Beneath the warm golden light of a cascading crystal chandelier sat a massive circular oak table. Marcus stood up immediately as I entered, a broad, practiced smile spreading across his face. He was wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit that undoubtedly cost upwards of $8,000, bought with money he had stolen from my mother's legacy. Chloe was seated to his right, draped in a backless emerald silk gown, sipping champagne with the casual elegance of someone who had never worked a day in her life. But we were not alone. Across the table sat 3 strangers. They were older men, dressed in severe, immaculate business suits, their posture rigid and their expressions carefully neutral. Ah, there she is, Marcus boomed, stepping forward to wrap me in a suffocating theatrical embrace. His cologne was overpowering. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce my eldest daughter, Ashley. She is a senior structural engineer at one of the top firms in Chicago, the absolute pride of our family. It is a pleasure to meet you, Ashley, the lead executive said, his accent faintly European. He extended a manicured hand. Your father has spoken highly of your analytical mind. We represent the holding group acquiring the downtown commercial block. I shook his hand, my grip firm and my expression perfectly pleasant. The pleasure is mine. My father is always full of surprises. I took my assigned seat between Chloe and the second executive for the next hour. I endured a masterclass in psychological warfare. Course after course was served by silent, white-gloved waiters, seared scallops, duck confit, and caviar that tasted like ash on my tongue. Marcus and Chloe played their parts flawlessly. They painted the picture of a loving, close-knit family, a united front moving forward with a mutually beneficial business transaction. Chloe even reached over and affectionately squeezed my hand, her perfectly manicured nails digging slightly into my skin. Ashley works so hard, Chloe told the table, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. We are just so glad she could fly down to celebrate her early birthday with us. Family is everything, right? Indeed it is, the lead executive agreed, raising his glass of Bordeaux. Then, as the waiter cleared the dessert plates and poured the final round of espresso, the atmosphere shifted, the casual banter dissolved. The real reason for this expensive dinner was finally brought to the table. Marcus reached down and lifted a sleek black leather folio from his briefcase. He placed it squarely in the center of the table. The soft thud of the leather against the wood sounded like a gavel dropping. "Well, gentlemen, while we have the whole family together, I figured we could knock out some minor administrative housekeeping," Marcus said smoothly, his tone remarkably casual. He opened the folio, revealing a thick stack of heavily tabbed legal documents. Since Ashley is officially taking her seat at the adult table next week when she turns 33, the estate lawyers just needed to update the internal holding structures. Standard bureaucratic nonsense to ensure a clean transfer for the building sale. He slid the documents across the polished oak until they rested directly in front of me. From his breast pocket, he produced a heavy gold-plated Mont Blanc pen and laid it carefully beside the paper. "Just need your signature on the 3 yellow tabs, sweetheart," Marcus said, flashing me a warm paternal smile. "It just shows the board that all the beneficiaries are aligned and informed. Then we can order a bottle of that vintage champagne to properly celebrate." I looked down at the crisp white paper. The trap was perfectly laid. He had cornered me in a room full of powerful, wealthy strangers. He was utilizing social compliance, banking on my deeply ingrained polite nature to simply sign the papers rather than cause a messy, embarrassing scene in front of high-profile buyers. I did not move. I just stared at the pen. The silence in the room began to stretch, pulling tighter and tighter with every passing second. Chloe let out a soft, theatrical sigh, leaning toward me. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, perfectly calibrated for everyone to hear. "Come on, Ash. It is just a formality. Do not hold up the celebration over some boring paperwork. You always overthink these things. Just sign it so we can toast." Classic gaslighting. Make me the difficult one. Make me the obstacle to the family's happiness. I slowly reached out and picked up the gold-plated pen. It felt heavy and cold. I unspooled the cap with deliberate slowness. I could feel the collective gaze of the 3 executives resting on my shoulders. I could see the subtle relaxation in Marcus's posture. He thought he had won. He thought the foundation had buckled exactly as he calculated. I brought the tip of the pen down, hovering a fraction of an inch above the signature line. Then I stopped. I set the pen down on the table with a sharp metallic click. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "You know, Dad," I said, my voice completely steady, devoid of any anger or fear. "As an engineer, I make it a habit never to approve a blueprint without reading the load-bearing calculations first." Marcus let out a forced, slightly breathless chuckle. "Of course, sweetie, but these are just boilerplate clauses. The lawyers already vetted them." "I am sure they did," I replied. I reached out and flipped past the signature page, turning to the dense, small print hidden in the middle of the stack. "Let us see here," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. "Section 4, paragraph 12. The undersigned beneficiary, Ashley Contreras, willfully and permanently relinquishes all present and future claims to the primary commercial estate." The polite smiles on the faces of the 3 executives instantly vanished. I flipped another page, the crisp rustle of the paper deafening in the sudden, suffocating silence. "Section 5, paragraph 2, I read aloud, my tone conversational and bright. The undersigned consents to the retroactive validation of all prior asset leverage, absolving the executor, Marcus Contreras, of any financial liability regarding the $75 million in high-interest loans secured against the property over the last 5 years. "Ashley, that is enough," Marcus snapped, his voice dropping its warm facade, cracking like a whip. A thick bead of sweat suddenly materialized on his forehead, catching the light of the chandelier. "Wait, there is a great one here at the end," I continued, ignoring him completely. I looked directly into the eyes of the lead executive. Clause 9. The buyer acknowledges that 100% of the sale proceeds will be routed directly to 3 offshore holding entities based in the Cayman Islands, entirely bypassing the domestic trust. Chloe's chair scraped harshly against the floor as she jerked backward. Her face, previously flushed with champagne and arrogance, was now chalk white. Her eyes darted wildly between me, the executives, and our father. She looked like a cornered animal. "What is she talking about, Dad?" Chloe hissed, her voice trembling. "Tell them she is crazy. Tell them she does not understand the legal terminology." I closed the leather folio and pushed it back across the table toward my father. "I understand the terminology perfectly. Chloe," I said softly, the calm in my voice slicing through her rising panic. "I also understand that I am sitting at a table with 3 men who are about to unwittingly purchase a stolen building." I picked up the heavy gold pen one last time, feeling its weight. Then, I threw it hard against the polished oak table. It clattered violently, spinning out of control before rolling off the edge and hitting the thick carpet. "I cannot sign away something you do not have the right to buy," I stated, my voice echoing in the stunned silence. The lead executive's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, what is the meaning of this?" I did not answer him immediately. I reached down to the floor, lifted my leather briefcase onto my lap, and snapped the brass latches open. I pulled out the thick stack of original, unaltered trust documents Elias Thorne had given me. I slammed them down right next to the fraudulent contract. Then, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black rubber case. I tossed my father's lost phone onto the center of the table. It slid and hit his wineglass with a sharp sound. Marcus stared at the device, the color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. "That building is legally locked down," I announced smoothly, addressing the 3 executives. "As of 8 o'clock this morning, I submitted a comprehensive audit to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Securities and Exchange Commission. It contains irrefutable proof of wire fraud, forged signatures, and illegal leveraging of protected assets across international borders. If you wire a single cent into those offshore accounts, your firm will be indicted as co-conspirators in a federal financial crime." The lead executive stood up so fast his chair tipped backward and crashed to the floor. He did not look at me. He looked at Marcus with a gaze of pure, unadulterated rage. "You lied to us," the executive snarled, aggressively buttoning his suit jacket. "You tried to use our capital to wash your stolen funds. This deal is dead, and if our firm's name ends up on a federal subpoena, our legal team will dismantle your entire life." Without another word, the 3 men stormed out of the VIP suite, slamming the heavy mahogany doors behind them. The silence that followed was absolute, shattered only by a sudden, piercing wail from Chloe. The realization hit her all at once. Her safety net was gone. The fake empire she built was vaporized. "My company," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands, her manicured nails digging into her scalp. "The creditors are going to call the loans tomorrow morning. I am going to prison. Dad, you promised me I was safe." Marcus did not look at her. He slowly sank back into his chair, the arrogant posture of a powerful patriarch completely collapsing. He looked small, pitiful. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, sickening panic. "Ashley, please," he croaked, his voice cracking. "You have to call the authorities and withdraw the complaint. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I will give you everything back. Just please, do not do this. We are family, after all." I looked down at the man who used to be my hero when I was a little girl. I searched my chest for any lingering trace of anger, hatred, or sorrow. There was nothing, just a vast, cold emptiness. "You are right," I said quietly, picking up my briefcase. "We are family, and this is the exact legacy you chose to build." I turned my back on them and walked out of the room, leaving Chloe's hysterical crying echoing behind the thick doors. I stepped out of the restaurant and into the freezing, relentless Seattle rain. The icy water hit my face, washing away the suffocating heat of the dining room. My secure phone rang in my pocket. I answered it. It was my lawyer, confirming that the injunction was approved and all my accounts were officially frozen and protected. I pulled the collar of my wool coat up against the wind. For the first time in 10 years, I smiled. I stepped forward into the city lights. leaving the ashes of my past washing down the gutters behind me. Thank you so very much for listening to my story today. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let me know. If you found today's journey compelling and want to support Maya Revenge Stories, please consider helping us with just $1. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description and pinned comment. Since YouTube demonetized our channel, your support is the only way we can pay our dedicated staff, help them provide for their families, and continue creating the stories you love. Thank you for standing with us.